Thank you, Rob. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My job is to wake you up after lunch by insulting just enough of the audience to get your attention, but not so much as to cause you to walk out. As Rob said, I cut my interoperability teeth in a variety of roles, primarily in the military. And what I want to do is try and compare and contrast some of that experience with the reality of today in the civilian world. That's my aim. We'll look really at the critical success factors in this business. Nor is easy because a lot of emotion gets wrapped around the axle, or used to. Some years ago, I had a very violent argument with a very senior police officer who told me that I didn't understand the military thing was totally irrelevant because in the military everybody is told and the police were far more complicated and I really didn't understand. That is what I call complicated. And they didn't all do what they were told. The command status of the American division was op can't, the French division op non, and the British division commanded by the redoubtable para Mike Jackson, op yours. In particular, if you wanted to get your mail delivered by the Estonian post platoon transported by the Belgian transport battalion, you needed to have a fair degree of interoperability or else the Mars bars went missing. Pity the commanding officer of the Portuguese parachute battalion sharing on one boundary the Italians, on another the Americans, on the third side the Russians, and on the fourth side the Serbs, who were less than cooperative. That was an extremely complicated interoperability equation. And that was the first multinational operation I'd ever been involved in, other than serving briefly with the US Army. And you can see from the 26 nations there that the lingua franca had to be bad English, apart from the Germans who thought theirs was very good. But to make that work in a launched military campaign in midwinter in 2 feet of snow at minus 25 Celsius across two of the largest rivers in Europe into an operational theatre containing 14 million landmines was some achievement in interoperability. And you didn't do something like that without getting a few ideas about how to make it work. That's the truth of it, because this ain't hard, practically, because the area that really matters is the bit in the middle. We do not need to amend the 1984 Police and Criminal Evidence Act in the name of interoperability, or the Fire Service Regulatory Orders, or whatever. It's just the bits in the middle where you do sensible things. And provided you focus on what has to be done, rather than looking for the obstacles, it all becomes much simpler. The trick is to create the preconditions. So for the last 9 years, Rob McFarlane and I and others have been working on the enablers whilst uttering a prayer when we went to bed every night that one day there would be a thing called a Joint Emergency Services Interoperability Programme. And this summer, our prayers were finally answered. And it arrived, and by are we pleased. But we started on concepts in 2003, the doctrine in 2003 and 2004, the lexicon in 2005, because in 2005 our survey suggested that out there in the emergency services there were 8,300 words, phrases, sayings and terms in use in command and control for emergency management. That's 1/3 of the entire volume of the totality of the Oxford English Dictionary. There has to be some simplification and rationalization. Common map symbology and signage, always handy, and we've been working on that. How long now, Rob? About 3 years? About 3 years. And we're now turning our mind to information management formats, because if you put those in place, all the rest comes simple. And surprise, surprise, that was exactly the pathway that NATO followed between 1948 at its foundation and 1955. And all of what you saw on the previous slide was founded on those simple enablers. And sensible training, and above all, the will to do it. And now I really sense that there is the will to do it. There is massive political buy-in at ministerial level, which Joe will talk about in more detail, for the first time I've ever known it, to a degree I've never previously seen. That's what underpins it all. If you get the enablers right and you've got the will to implement it, by and large, you're going to crack it. Getting the joint doctrine right is the key to it all. We have a statutory instrument at the top from which is derived direct governmental guidance, within which there's a chapter on joint operations, from which we hope to derive a joint ops handbook, and we already have a first draft of a pocket aid memoir. 6x4, straight in the top pocket on plasticized paper, which we will create, staff it, run and run and run and run until everybody's very happy with it, to become basically an aid memoir for bronze commanders, silver commanders, or anyone else who wants it. Because part of the problem is previously that we've had plenty of doctrine, but it hasn't been suitably accessible. Let's think now, we've left on a slide, right, okay. There's a slide gone missing here, that's quite interesting. Ken's eaten one of my slides. Never mind, no you haven't, Ken. Not guilty. One of the things that CCS was asked to produce in support of the joint of JESIP was an interoperability planning assumption to go with the rest of the national resilience planning assumptions. And there you see one. Now, for students of history, it's called Lockerbie. Key point there. Most of that you can read. Huge evidence gathering exercise. There's debris and evidence scattered over thousands and thousands of square kilometers. Very rapid reinforcement, very big mutual aid operation, all of which descended onto what was arguably the smallest and least capable infrastructure in terms of police, fire and local government in the whole of the United Kingdom. Dumfries and Galloway is quite a large county, but it hasn't got many people living in it, give or take Ronnie Coots's holiday cottage. And its emergency services and its local government facilities are sized and scaled to match. And all this fell upon them. Right up close to its eastern boundary, in the dark, at the junction of 4 map sheets, and to make matters worse, the lead battalion in Scotland were the Royal Highland Fusiliers, and this was the night of their Christmas party. The ultimate bravery award going to the young lieutenant who had to enter the arena in the NAFI in Edinburgh to announce that the battalion had about 6 seconds to sober up, get on the 4-tonners and go to Lockerbie. And that was bravery in extreme. But so you will see there that the interoperability planning assumption is based on historical fact. We have been here before. But it underlines a whole raft of points. A lot of reinforcement. So you can't just say, I'm going to do interoperability pairwise with my local force, my local fire and rescue service, and my own local government, or at a real push, the people directly adjacent to my right or my left. This isn't a pairwise operation. It has to be universal, because, as you heard from Chris Allison this morning, if you are taking in reinforcing policemen from 52 different forces, you've got to be able to do that coherently and seamlessly. Whatever you do, it's got to be simple. Because whilst training is essential, we have to be realistic about how much of it we can do. Changing shift patterns, watch patterns and the rest, and getting people together the same place and time is not easy. It's got to be easy to remember. It cannot be based on dozens and dozens of pages of detailed guidance. And people are going to stick to it under the most extreme pressure. And one of the features of Lockerbie was the extreme pressure that responders were under. And it's the same of any major emergency or major incident. So, because once the incident starts, there isn't any spare management or leadership capacity to fix it then. That's too late. It ain't big. It's quite limited in scope. But in the words of Craig Dunham, it may not be big, but we've got to do it right, and we've got to do it well in the area of overlap. And we can do it.